It is 7:32 this Sunday morning. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And joining us to go through some of the day's headlines are the writer and journalist Emma Wolfe and the journalist and writer Ella Whelan.
Yeah.
So, see what I did there? No.
Very clever. Before we have a chat, ladies, let's just bring you up to date with the Sunday newspapers this morning. The Sunday Times says hate, intolerance and arrests as thugs hijack Armistice Day.
The Mail on Sunday leads with Michael Gove jostled and abused by pro-Palestine hate mob.
Sunday Mirror has right-wing mob in cop clash, laying the blame with the Home Secretary.
And the Observer writes, calls grow for Israel to hold fire in Gaza as marchers throng London.
Yeah, I'm not really sure that it's going to actually make any difference in that sense. But, who's Netanyahu going to listen to? A lot of people in London.
Exactly.
I don't think so.
Are they making their decisions based on us marching here and across Europe? I don't think so.
No. Emma, you've been looking at all this, but actually, although there has been a lot of focus on, because there was some violence from the anti-protest, if you like, but also what is worrying is these anti-Semitic signs that were spotted in the pro-Palestine rally.
Yeah, there have been pockets of people, and there have been men, and it is men, wearing these Hamas-style sort of, face coverings, and there have been people displaying the flag. And I think what's going to be quite interesting, the Met Police have said we know that everything is filmed these days, there's a lot of footage. The police have said they have facial super recognisers, they have all sorts of very, very sophisticated technology, and that they are going to follow up, they are going to pursue these individuals. Anyone who is identified will be held to account.
And so they should be.
Of course they should. And I just want... I mean, the Hamas flag is clearly a symbol of aggression and designed to instill fear in people when it's being displayed like this on arches.
I mean, we were showing pictures
and
some
you do
of these
see people with their faces covered.
Coverings that are clearly...
What do you feel about that? That's threatening. I was going through Bethnal Green and there were a couple of men with faces covering and flags hanging out of their car. For whatever reason, they weren't aggressing me, but I felt frightened. It is an aggressive display in that way. So let's see what the police do in terms of the follow-up after this weekend is over.
Well, they did follow through, didn't they, with those the two women who were wearing the badge on the back of their coats with the
paraglider.
Yeah, and they did follow that through, and those women are going to have to appear in court.
Yeah. It worries me, about the desensitising of people if you start to show really awful pictures. But I do wonder if there should have been some pictures released of what happened on October the 7th to show people some of the horror of it all.
Well, obviously, this is anti-Semitism in 2023, which is that it's the oldest hatred with the most easy sort of expression. Because there's, as Emma has pointed out, there is the very obvious sort of pro-Hamas displays. But there is also a kind of examples throughout the protests, and obviously not everyone. There's enough examples at the protests to make you wince of a sort of almost banal anti-Semitism at this point. So pictures of Netanyahu with blood dripping out of his mouth, horns calling him the puppet master, obvious anti-Semitic rhetoric about Jews running the world and about, blood libels and things like that. I mean, that's kind of, in some instances, now become almost commonplace. I mean, we've been talking about a sort of low-level anti-Semitism that in particular, the British left have turned a blind eye to, unfortunately. Images of people saying, keep the world clean, putting the Israel flag in the bin. All of this is sort of obvious to any Jewish person of what it really means.
Well, I mean, it's exactly what was happening with Hitler, wasn't it? It's how all that started.
How many times have we heard, never again?
Yes.
And even this chant about from the river to the sea, people are pretending this is open to interpretation, and it may be. But really, when you have a group of people like Jews saying how that makes them feel, would it not be the right thing to say, OK, we will not be chanting? You can't pretend that is not, deeply offensive.
And I suppose, this is David Baddiel's argument, Jews don't count, which is that if there was any other... Say, for example, you had people chanting the N-word or people saying words like faggot or things like that, but deeply offensive words which, you know, you could have an argument, oh, it used to mean this, or it used to mean that, or whatever, that you know, there would be no tolerance for that whatsoever. But when it comes to things that could be interpreted as either way in relation to anti-Semitic chants, it does feel like Jews are always being told, oh, why are you getting so het up about this? You know, why are you so sensitive about this? It really means this. And there's an obvious discrepancy there. As it happens, my free speech stance stands on this, and I think that people should be allowed to say awful things, because I think that a thing we have to consider tactically is that we know that this kind of the Islamist sentiment and also anti-Semitic sentiment festers underground. It festers under censorship, and radicalisation is a problem behind closed doors. So I think the more debate about this and the more sunlight we can show on this and challenge this in the public square, not by idiot far-right thugs, but by genuine people who go along and to these protests and say, OK, but what about Hamas? OK, but let's have a genuine conversation about this. That needs to happen.
Everything is
and
weaponized.
I'm so shocked at how much anti-Semitism has been festering.
I am really shocked.
Just within our normal communities, just within sort of middle-class groups of mums that I know saying they're joining the marches, assuming that everybody is going on these marches with their children, and that they are that October the 7th almost didn't happen.
Yeah. Look, the Prime Minister released a statement in response to what we saw yesterday, and he said, I condemn the violent, wholly unacceptable scenes we've seen today from the EDL, that's the English Defence League, and associated groups, and Hamas sympathisers attending the National March for Palestine. Well, that's about as diplomatic as you can be.
Sort of say he must have really worried over every word.
Yeah. But I mean, this is a weird thing to say, but I'm sort of heartened in reflection about the scale of the far-right protest, because if this is the extent of the organised far-right in the UK, we don't have some kind of drug-addled, drunk, idiot thugs who are looking to kind of bust an eyebrow with someone else, basically, and masking it as in defence of the cenotaph, then we don't have too much to worry about. But because the EDL have spent, you know, years now having an annual day out in Brighton where they go and sort of try and, you know, rough up a few people, and that's about it. It's not the kind of serious political force with the serious public support that it had 30, 40, 50 years ago. That's not to downplay their behaviour, but the interesting thing is that anti-Semitism, you know, Stephen, you said it's like, you know, what happened with the Nazis and Hitler, and there are elements of that and overtones of that. But the difference here is that anti-Semitism today it's not simple. It's a kind of awful mix of things. There's a sort of Islamist element to it. There's the old school far-right element to it. And there's also this kind of the willful ignorance of progressives as well. And that's all mixing together in this complicated kind of mesh that allows it to grow and fester. So it's not like the 30s and 40s, because it's not identifiably from a single political bloc. It's a kind of mess of forces being brought together. I mean, who'd have thought that you'd have similarities between radical Islamists and, I don't know, National Front throwbacks, but actually they share the anti-Semitism is something that they share.
It's
horribly
hate is what they shared, and I find that deeply shocking that so many people seem to enjoy hating.
Yeah.
And it's
bad for the soul.
I think the last few days have exposed what a horribly divided and unhappy country we are at the moment. There's just so much weaponising of people's ideas and taking sides and attacking each other. And that's not just on the extreme left and the extreme right.
Yeah. Well, OK, let's have a look. Let's move focus, should we? Before I get thoroughly and totally depressed. To Nigel Farage.
Oh, well, there you go.
Who's always going to cheer us up a little bit. Ella, TikTok could be his way forward.
I don't know who's running his PR and who has convinced Nigel to go into the jungle. We'll wait to see. Maybe he'll be one of the best contestants ever.
He's going to win. He's going to win.
I am not convinced, particularly because the lineup. I think there's so many people in the lineup that are going to be going into that jungle wanting to take a lump out of him.
Let them try, I say.
Well, sure, but
they don't know him. They don't know that actually he will actually charm them.
He will.
I think it's a disaster, but I wait to be convinced otherwise. But you know, OK, you'd think Nigel Farage wants to stereotype. You think old supporters, Brexit supporters, all those kind of stereotypes. In actual fact, the Mail picks up on the, he has a huge following on TikTok, racking about 6.5 million likes.
My goodness.
His videos about, drinking pints, saying Brexit means Brexit, is obviously, proving that, surprise, surprise, not all young people are a monolithic political bloc, and they do have different opinions. But the thing I would like to pick him up on is this sort of intolerable idea that politicians have, that if they get on reality TV, that's what will convince young people. If they eat a few spiders in some outback somewhere, or rats' genitals, then all these young people will say, actually, I think your policy on foreign policy is really quite up. I agree with it. It's such a simplistic understanding of why people get political.
No, I don't think he has a point to prove, particularly at the moment. I think he's doing it partly perhaps for the money. Yeah. I think he's doing it because he loves being in the public eye. I think he's doing it probably for a laugh. He's also, isn't he, overnight, I think he's going to launch a legal battle against HSBC for the debanking.
NatWest.
NatWest, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
There you go.
But yes.
I don't think he's trying to win. I mean, I think he's trying to win.
Well, that's what he said, as much as you can take anything. He said, he says, these are people who don't really watch the news, 10 million young people who watch this programme. In my mind, if I was to do it, I might be able to connect with that audience.
Well,
OK, the £1 million fee might help, but,
the vote.
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting about Nigel. I like Nigel a lot, and you don't have to agree with Nigel to like him. And I know a lot of people who watch his show here on GB News who like it because it's a discussion show, and he's open to discuss things and have someone who really diametrically opposes it and talk it through.
Yeah, and he connects with people, and that's what I think that's what a lot of people like about.
Shall we have a look at one of his TikToks?
Oh, go on.
We've got one. Let's have a look.
Maybe 105 years ago, but the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month still matters in a huge way. St. Greta Thunberg, the girl that's going to save the world. And there she was in London, being arrested for a public order offence. The United Nations, well, that sounds grand, doesn't it? What a lovely idea. Should we accept refugees from Gaza? Of course, people will say yes. Remember, we've taken over 500,000 refugees in just the last handful of years.
There you go. He's good at it as well.
Short. He makes his point.
Yes, he does.
I wonder who does it then.
Some 25-year-old.
Oh, what?
It always has to be.
Yeah,
be a young
whiz who does all that.
Yeah. He won't do that himself.
But he's very savvy. He knows how to connect out there, doesn't he?
I don't watch Jungle, but I think he's going to do brilliantly.
It might be the first time I'll watch it.
Oh, no, this is an interesting one, Emma.
Speaking of...
ULEZ, because obviously ULEZ is about as popular as a plate of...
Cold.
Well, yes, whatever. London's getting round ULEZ by putting poppies over their number plate.
Yeah, I don't know if we have the footage. Apparently it was on, these viral photos were on Facebook. Sort of feels somewhat disrespectful, doesn't it?
Oh, there we are.
Really.
Do you think?
It's a very big poppy over the number plate.
To be using the poppy in that way is probably...
I don't know. I mean, it's highly illegal. It's got to be said, it's illegal to disguise your number plate.
Yes.
But I do, nevertheless, sort of think it's been a bit of clever thinking. Not that I condone it, obviously.
I condone it. Fair play to them. I mean, if you're whatever, illegal behaviour, but whatever you can do, the amount of money that has been made out of ULEZ fines is eye-watering. And if you think about that in relation to the state of the roads, potholes and all the rest of it, I sound like an old woman now. But anything to thwart the ULEZ is OK in my book. I don't care what you use.
The bill of repairing
daisies.
ULEZ cameras that have been sabotaged is huge as well. So it's costing us all money.
I heard about someone actually just a couple of days ago who had to change their van because they couldn't afford to use their old van. They changed their van. They got one that fell within the safe rules. Broke down within a couple of days and has cost them £3,000.
Yeah, and this is people who are running small businesses or older people or whatever.
It's going to finish them.
And I also object to the waste, the absolute waste of so many cars and vans that are maybe just out of the, kind of ULEZ compliant restrictions, which are just being wasted, which we're going to put into landfill and get new cars for everybody, which they can't afford.
Yeah.
Such a shame.
I just think it's a scam, but it's Sadiq Khan's poll tax.
It is, and there's been so little consultation with Londoners on this and other cities around the UK. And also that research and the findings about ULEZ and about air pollution were very, very inconclusive.
Shaky,
They were shaky. There was suggestion in, repeat across the media that people had been leaned upon to say, yeah, ULEZ looks great, or they've been asked to strengthen their opinions about that, which simply, the evidence was not there. So I think Sadiq Khan needs to be a lot more accountable to for this.
Could it be the death knell for him?
The thing about London is that it's, obviously it's split in many ways, but there's a very deep class divide in London. And I think a lot of the kind of ULEZ sentiment does run along class lines. So there are lots of... I mean, that might be unfair, but to talk generally, there's a kind of middle-class Londoners who like green stuff. They, either...
Got their expensive cars.
Yeah, or they get cabs,
got a newish
whatever.
car, exactly.
They don't do... they're not care workers who need a car. They're not, I don't know, labourers or people who work in, your plumber, your whatever, who needs a car to get around. So they're fine with it. Green credentials, no problem. A lot of young people, like we were just talking about in the last hour, who don't drive. Oh, green stuff, very nice.
Yeah.
And then there's the sort of servant class of London who has to serve London, who needs vehicles, who are very against it. There is a solution to this, which is just, if everybody thinks, having more choice is a nice thing, put on a big push for public transport.
Yeah, exactly.
Pile all the money into public transport, double all the bus... trying to get a bus in London can sometimes be a nightmare. Up that, and I bet you more people will take buses and read your book nicely on the bus. Who wouldn't like to do that rather than sat in traffic? But instead, he goes for the punitive approach.
Except that when you go on the tube or a bus, no one is reading books anymore and everybody's staring at their phone. But apart from that...
Or looking for bed bugs.
Spot on.
Can
No,
read a
people
book
are not
on your
reading
phone.
books on the tubes and trains,
Can
sadly.
we, Ella, tell us about this footage that's been going viral about what happened in a pub when diners wanted to get a refund on their food.
This is hilarious. So, at a pub in the Observatory in Blackburn, a woman complained and said that in her £12.95 roast there was a hair, and it was just disgusting, and that she wanted a refund. And the owner went to look at the footage to make sure that his staff had their hair tied back, and actually found that the customer herself had tweaked one out of her own scalp and put it into the food in order to try and, lie. She was lying and to say...
there she is, she's doing it.
Putting it in. Which is, in the old days, you used to just do a mad dog, which is you'd run out without paying. But this seems slightly less dignified, which is putting your own, clawing out clumps of your hair and putting it into the food. But really, unacceptable, rude on the staff, and should be barred.
The camera that's looking at her doing that, is that just a general camera that's...
CCTV in a restaurant.
Filmed everywhere. Everything we do, every movement nowadays is covered by some kind of CCTV, isn't it?
Mind you...
What's that in a restaurant?
I don't blame him.
No, I don't blame him at all.
I don't blame them, because if that... The sheer nerve of someone saying, "Oh, we'll go out for Sunday dinner. Yeah. We'll go out for dinner."
Probably ate most of it and then
ate most of it, and then we'll not pay. What a blooming cheek.
Yeah,
actually.
It is pretty nasty though when you see people who are serving or people who are working in the kitchens or whatever with their hair down, and you want to say, "Please, come on, please." I mean, hair falls out. Long hair falls out. It does. Especially around sort of food hygiene and things. I think that, does highlight that. But, yeah, she clearly whipped out her hair and chucked it in.
That is awful. But I do worry about the fact that we are all being watched by cameras all the time.
Well, we often talk about Stephen's camera surveillance of his own home.
Not on air, we don't. But we can do. No, I've got cameras around the house and things. Yeah. They follow you about as well.
I know, that's what I find so creepy. Yeah. Even in your own home, I find it really creepy.
Well, it's not that we look at each other when we're not there.
Was it to catch the cat when he's doing something funny?
It could catch the cat, yeah. But it's also, it's if you got broken into.
Yeah.
Then you can see.
You would have the footage, absolutely.
The thing that I find really alarming is the Ringo cameras, on people's front doors, because there's, before you go into a party, you sort of kind of get yourself. Yeah. Right, you have to mentally prepare yourself to knock on the door and get that. The idea that someone could watch me sort of, before I go in is a total invasion of privacy.
Or the whole sort of. Oh, we don't want to be. We'll get out in half an hour.
We'll agree. We'll leave at 8. Okay. Yeah, that kind of thing.
There you are. You've just got to remember you're always being watched by a camera then, aren't you?
Yes. If you could afford one, because if Bank of Mum and Dad haven't got much money left, Emma, according to the Mail.
Yeah, the Bank of Mum and Dad. God, who has mums and dads like this? I've never had mums and dads like this, but the Bank of Mum and Dad in the UK is dishing out around 98 billion over the past 5 years to their grown-up children. 98 billion.
Well, you have to. It's to help them get on the housing ladder.
I know what it's for. It's for housing ladder, and it's for help with bills and all of this. But I just don't know these parents who give their children. I mean, my parents had 5.
I think
of us,
it is a big worry that actually there's a generation now of parents, the sort who would think, I'll help my children out with this.
Who can afford to do it.
Who are spending their pension doing it, or are taking. In fact, you're actually encouraged to those loans that you can have
on your property.
Yes, what's it called?
Payday.
It's a.
I know what you mean.
You sort of leverage it against your house.
Yeah, and apparently an awful lot of older
Releasing
parents
equity.
are doing that, releasing equity. Yeah. They're doing that to help their children, and they could actually be endangering their own retirement by doing so.
Well, I think there's also a lot of parents who are doing this who are wealthy and are doing it in a cunning kind of tax wheeze. You pass the money over, 7 years before your death so that they don't end up paying tax duties, all of that. I know people. I'm very envious of them. They get a big chunk from their parents to buy houses. I mean, this is astonishing to me. But
well, if you've got it, that's fair enough.
Yeah, great.
I suppose.
If you've got wealthy parents and they want to give you 50 grand or 100 grand to put down a deposit. And look, let's be honest, nowadays property is so expensive and prohibitive for young people that they need all the help they can get.
There'll be 98 billion, though.
It's up, and it's split. I mean, obviously, in London, where there tends to be richer people, but also there's less housing and less opportunities for young people to get on the housing ladder. 23.8 billion in London, compared to 1.9 billion in the northeast. So obviously, it's
predominantly the southeast, exactly.
Ladies, thank you. Emma, Ella, we'll see you a little bit later on. In the meantime, let's get a check on the weather for you with Jonathan.